positions with recognition of their diversity and alterity, and they give also the direction of change. I was also reading a bit in brain science literature, and there is also indications that on the level of the frontal cortex, that there is much more planning and more long-term view, which is somewhere functioning as a counterforce to these lower circuit mechanisms which are linked to the limbic system. So this is a very quick reaction, my limbic system, very quick emotional reaction, but I can think about it on a higher level. Metaposition is typically thinking and reflecting on a higher level and provides a more long-term view. I think this long-term view is very important, particularly when people are somewhere subjected to overdoses of emotions, or by emotion TV, or by things which are just exciting. Can there be long-term views where there are metapositions? The development of a metaposition is a broad bandwidth, so when it can comprise a larger amount of specific positions, contributes to the integration and continuity of the repertoire as a whole. That would be maybe one of my last things. Question to you: when and where do you take a metaposition? Right? So take 2 minutes for this exercise. When and where do you take a metaposition in the sense in which it's described here? Well, I'm sorry, in fact I'm in the beginning of my presentation, but there is no time left for all the other things which I have prepared. Happily we have a workshop where we can do some other things, because there is one concept I would love to discuss with you, is a promoter position which gives a developmental impetus to a number of more specific positions. Promoter position. That's, for some people it can be I as persistent. For other people it can be I as loving. Or again, other people it can be the mission, my mission in life. That is, the developmental impetus is more temporal, while the metaposition is more spatial concept. The promoter's position is more temporal, gives a stimulus. There are also external promoter positions. I was in Africa for giving some lectures a few weeks ago, and I could really see that there is in South Africa, there is a very important external promoter position in the cell of many blacks and whites. It's Mandela. It's like Gandhi in India. It is maybe an inspiring teacher in our case, a person who is internalized in yourself and gives a very important contribution in your worldview, in your personal development, in the development of your collective voices. Summarizing. As being on the interface of a modern and postmodern self, the dialogical self is faced with the challenge to overcome the contradiction between unity and multiplicity, between consistency and inconsistency, and between self and other. Second, from a dynamic point of view, the self is engaged in centering and decentering movements. Both movements are equivalent in a dialogical self. So unity has not primacy. It's very good for self to become disorganized, to be in crisis, to be exposed to differences and to oppositions. Finally, the dialogical self can only be developed in a dialogical environment, and vice versa. Self and society can be brought together when the self is considered as a society of mind, and a society as an interface of different selves and cultures. Well, I would like to go on, but John is looking very clearly. Thank you very much.
Am I that transparent?
Yes. Some time for questions or remarks, criticism.
Yeah, I had a question about what do you think of the notion of a dialogical self in a society, and that I think is becoming more and more individualistic, and the level of social alienation is increasing. So on the one hand, like you say, like cultural diversity, it's becoming an increasingly serious concern, and there's so much multiplicity within you that you have to question about. But on the other hand, I guess there's all these technological advancements that people are utilizing, so people are stuck in their homes, they're not really connected to the local community. Mental illness is seen more as a biochemical thing, so it's seen as something that's between the individual and his or her madness, and not about the social context that's in. So there's an element about today's society that I think is becoming more and more separatist and individualistic, and how do you reconcile the notion of the dialogical self in an increasingly individualistic society?
Well, I'm very happy that, listening to your question, and I understand it very well, that we have in the room Vincent Hermans. He's writing now. Vincent Hermans was writing a chapter in our handbook about internet, right? Dialogical self and internet. And when I reflect your view correctly, you show quite convincingly that there are internet, right, makes possible both more dialogical relationship, but there are very striking examples of extremely closed monological views in internet. Is that right, yes. Vincent? Yes? That would be the answer, yes.
I'm interested in how you see the relationship of the continuum of awareness between conscious and unconscious to the dialogical self.
Mm-hmm. As it was a little bit reflected in the example of Alice, that when you see, in agreement with George Kelly, the difference between conscious and conscious is not as a dichotomy, but as a kind of scale. You can go down to the unconscious and you can come up from the unconscious to the conscious. Then you could say that this open position for her was much more clearly on the level of the conscious awareness. This closed position was less conscious. There were elements, I think there is this or that in that. She didn't know. She wanted to know it. So I think that I positions can very strongly, can vary on the dimension conscious, unconscious. I have also some examples of people, for example, I remember one of the students of mine, she heard from a colleague, she said, "You are jealous," and she totally rejected that she was jealous. Half a year later, she wrote a report that it was right. She was jealous, but did not recognize it. That was quite on the low level of consciousness, but could, by reflection and discussion with other people, it could be promoted to the level of consciousness.
So you don't bring it in specifically in the theory, in terms of how to
if there is a particular concept in the theory, which, well, there is one concept which comes in the neighborhood, is the concept of shadow positions. Shadow positions are unacceptable positions which are excluded from the repertoire of positions. That comes, I think, most close. Shadow positions. Yes?
I thought this was a very exciting talk, especially at the end. You said at the early point that you're not a postmodernist, but you felt that you wanted to learn about postmodernism. I think that you've gone beyond postmodernism, and I hope in a way that will eventually lead to its death. In what I've seen, what you've done, in your earlier work, you rejected the Cartesians by saying it's dialogical. You've also kind of gone against the grain of the postmodernists by saying there's an I position here. And now I think you've gone even further. You've followed the tradition of Hegel and Marx and Piaget and others who say we have to talk about synthesis rather than simply the coexistence of opposites. And frankly, I think that that's probably our best way out of the morass that we have in the world. We have to begin to not only accept the other's position, but begin to get local syntheses. I wonder what your thoughts are about that, especially at a global level.
Well, first of all, you know me better than I know myself. What you say, it sounds like music, and that would be in fact my answer. I have to think about that, what you said about this synthesis. This synthesis is indeed, it's part of the thinking. And the synthesis is, I had not much time for that, it's reflected in the notions of meta position and promoter position. There is a strong synthetic element. I think basically, that was the cover of the book, it's about